Morning, everyone. Just to introduce myself, my name is Edwin Pahk. I'm the Territory Manager for Europe for Laserfiche. As you can tell, I'm not necessarily from around here. I'm actually was shipped out from our corporate headquarters out in Long Beach, California. We now have an office in the UK, in a little place called Watford. I don't know if you know where that is. But basically, I'm here today to talk about exactly how going on with this theme and kind of picking up where Fergal left off with this idea of controlling your costs with an agile ECM approach, which will effectively result, honestly, in putting down a foundation towards understanding and controlling your governance, risk, and compliance within your organization. And so, really, from the first, I guess from the first point, or the first question that I'm going to ask and I'm going to try to answer for you is, why exactly content management? Why is content management important in this idea of controlling your costs, in this idea of promoting this idea of information governance, of really managing your risk and really adhering to compliance standards that exist today, but also moving towards the future as compliance does tend to change year after year. Really, the idea of content management has evolved over the last 20 years, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this and exactly why people, and effectively 32,000 organizations worldwide look at our solution and utilize our solution for content management. And really, the idea of this first kind of evolved and resulted from this idea of access. The ability to access your documents and your information has always been one of great importance, of significance, because of the fact that, for example, if something exists on a piece of paper, but you want to be able to access, understand information that you might not necessarily have off the top of your head, or basically in your brain effectively, let's say, for example, as a contract. I take a look at a contract and maybe 50 pages long, but the reality of it is I want to look at a contract that has a very specific clause. How am I supposed to find that in all the contracts that my organization manages? And so this idea of utilizing content and document management to be able to make information and documents text searchable allows you to get better access and quicker access to the information that you're looking for. Obviously, that's kind of evolved now from just accessing documents in paper to this idea of being able to access it on the fly through your mobile device, your iPhone, your iPad, over the internet, but to be able to access it obviously in a very secure way. Which brings me to my next point, is the idea of content management, I would say 10, 15 years ago, was around access and security. This idea of being able to manage paper and to be able to manage information in a way that allows you to have greater transparency over the way that your organization works, but not only allow that, but to have greater security through that transparency. So the idea of being able to understand exactly who's accessing your information in your organization, who's exporting information, who's trying to delete or move things around within your content management, product or software. And really this idea of being able to handle and to be able to create this transparency and view into the way that information moves around your organization results in a much better approach from a governance perspective, and in terms of managing the risk of exposing information basically to the outside world. There are plenty of statistics out there. An average document is copied 20 times in its lifetime. If you even think about that, that statistic alone, the idea of having paper laying around, or even within your own network shared drive, even having documents there, do you know who's making copies of this, where it's being taken to? Is it, whether or not it resides on a laptop? Fergal just mentioned this idea, what happened with the 20 laptops with account details on it. Really this idea of understanding where your information resides and where it exists throughout your infrastructure, that's this idea of what content management will enable you to have a better understanding of. And these are really the first two key concepts, I would say, that have really resonated with a lot of organizations over the past 10 to 15 years. But what's kind of happened and transformed and moved this from there is this idea of being able to have information brought to you, rather than you going out to search for information. And because of the proliferation of information out there, not only in your organizations, but pretty much over the internet and throughout the world, the reality of it is, in order for you to work more efficiently, you need to be presented the information and the tasks that are relevant to yourselves, rather than you having to go search for them. And so this idea of workflow and business process automation came into place. And so really what that's kind of done is created this standardization around a governance framework of being able to utilize workflow and business process automation to create a consistent way in the way that you manage your organization's processes and your organization's information. And that's really kind of where workflow sits in this idea of governance, risk, and compliance. And so, and in the end, with regards to content management, is this idea of flexibility. And really, just as the saying goes, no one person is an island. We need to interact with other people within business, within organizations. In the same way, you cannot have one particular application, one particular line of business application, your accounts, your CRM application, whatever it may be, cannot sit on its own, because on its own, it creates an inherent risk. And this idea that you have information stored somewhere in your business, but that's not being effectively communicated and projected out to the rest of your business. And so this idea of being able to create this outcome of tying in different systems, disparate systems within your organization to create a better understanding and collaboration amongst multiple departments, amongst people in your organization is a very key concept that we try to promote, obviously, in this idea of content management. And so the reality of it is that you start to see this idea of having three components within ECM to help manage governance, manage risk. And this idea first starts from this idea of a central point of control. And this speaks to this idea of being able to handle and manage silos of information. And I'll give you a very specific example. We have a particular customer that has a CRM package, an accounts package, and a support package, effectively, for their mortgage applications. And the reality of it is that when, let's say, my CSR, or a customer service representative, makes a call to a particular person that has a mortgage, and they have a conversation, and they say, oh, I have some details that I need updating. I need to update on my account or my profile. And he goes, sure. So he updates it in his CRM package, all the account details. But the problem you have there is that if it's updated in your CRM, how exactly does that benefit your accounts department? Your accounts department is still going to have a certain set of information about that customer that might not necessarily have that update that was done through that conversation. How do you resolve that? And so really, after you generate this idea, or you're able to create this idea of a central point of control, as Virgil had talked about, the next step is to be able to have a framework that allows you to integrate and to have different systems to be able to talk to each other. So for example, we basically implemented a workflow so that any change that was made in a CRM package, we can then take those details, update them into other systems on the fly. And that's effectively what we promote as this idea of integrated middleware. And so with the first two components, this idea of centralizing your information so that you're able to have greater control over it, with the flexibility of integrating it with other applications, results in a very large return on investment, something we like to call a component of shared service or shared service model. And shared services does mean different things to different people, but really all I'm talking about here is this idea of what we call an ROI multiplier, a return on investment multiplier, of myself being able to apply this technology to any number of departments or any number of business processes within an organization. What's interesting is that, yes, we have different ways of working, but effectively we deal with the same type of information. And we go through the similar processes, as Virgil did mention before, this idea of accounts payable, of HR onboarding. But really what you have here is that by understanding these components, you start to then realize why ECM is such a big factor in so many organizations, because it does handle something that is relatively unstructured or in the ether, and this idea of documents and information and content that flows through your organization without you even knowing it, and that's really what it's about. And so really, just to focus on this, to give you an idea of what we would consider necessary tools. From an ECM and a GRC approach, are tools to be able to handle information through its entirety in terms of its life cycle. So the idea of when you're looking into solutions like these, how do you address capture? How do you address the bringing in of information into your organization? Because that's always a very, very important piece of this. If you're not able to bring in information effectively, then really you're not, it's the saying garbage in, garbage out. And that's really what it's about. The second is accessibility. How is an organization, how are you able to leverage and take advantage of tools that will allow you to access your information, not necessarily just from your desktop, because that's not what working is about anymore. Are there ways to be able to access it from your iPad, from your tablet, from your PC, laptop, on your phone, whether or not you're halfway across the world? I mean, that's really this idea and this question of having the right tools for accessibility. Workflow in terms of being able to automate business processes. As I said before, it's this idea that no longer are we in a situation that we are supposed to be going out and finding information. We actually, we are in a position that we need technology to be able to bring the appropriate information to us. And that's really what it's about. This is something that is sometimes overlooked and sometimes misunderstood. But this idea of records management, in terms of understanding that how to manage the way that you're handling the policies around content and information stored within your organization, and being able to adhere and create compliance standards through a records management functionality within your software. And that's really what it's about. It's this idea of being able to prove, not only to have a policy in place, but to be able to prove the fact that you're adhering to that policy. And this is where we feel that records management is a very key component to this idea of being able to manage GRC. And then finally, integration, this idea of flexibility, of being able to tie in different systems together, of being able to have all your technology talk in some form or another to help share information and keep information consistent throughout your organization. So I've talked about tools, but that's only half the battle. Technology will be out there, and technology will always be evolving, and you might find tools in a number of different places. But more so than the tools themselves, what we've come to understand is that it's about the approach that you take to using these tools, because it doesn't matter if you have a hammer. If you don't know how to use a hammer, it's not going to do much for you. And this is where we've kind of come up with this idea of understanding how to create immediate value for your organization through this idea of an agile approach. And so basically, what it first comes down to is finding the right solutions partner or finding the right technology that fits you. And I make this mention of Moore's Law. Who here knows what Moore's Law is about? It's a bit of a, yeah, so basically it's kind of a theory of this idea that technology doubles every 2 years. Or the idea that, in particular, it was about hardware, but I would more so apply to technology nowadays. If you think about it, 4 years ago, there were no tablets. I mean, and if you think about now how the proliferation of that has come about, it's amazing to see at the speed of technology moves. And the reason why I bring up this law, this idea of Moore's Law, is because of the fact that nowadays, if you're looking at purchasing technology or looking at acquiring technology as an investment, that investment will sometimes might not necessarily be realized within the year, within 2 years. But the question is then, if it's not going to be realized within 2 years and technology doubles at that time, effectively that investment will be obsolete if it's not moving forward with yourself. And finding the right technology that adapts to the industry, that understands and moves forward and evolves in itself is a very, very big and important concept because of the fact that technology moves so quickly. Which then will allow you to address this idea of change management because of, things in the future will always move. So maybe mobile devices won't be the big thing in 2 years from now. It could be something else, maybe augmented reality, I don't know, Google Glasses, it could be a number of different things. But being able to understand and identify the right partner with regards to technology will allow you to have a very sustainable approach. Because you know and you can be confident in the fact that 5 years from now, that piece of software or that product is not going to be the same as it was. It's going to have moved on and fit in with the way that we work 5 years from now. And so really, when we're talking about this idea of content, information, and being able to manage that to help control your costs, there are a number of different ways to go about looking at this. And first and foremost is this idea of a proven approach. This is what we talk about in terms of pure document management, this idea of I have a lot of paper, or I have a lot of content, a lot of email, I have a big shared drive that's not organized, not managed. I want to dump everything into there, put rules around it, and be able to have the appropriate access and appropriate configuration set up for it to be able to retrieve that. It goes from A to B in terms of the way the information moves. And it's a very proven approach. It's something that a lot of companies can do now, and you can even find software on the internet for pretty cheap to be able to accomplish this. But really, this idea is somewhat short-sighted in the grander scheme of things, in the way that organizations work. So it's kind of evolved into this idea, what we call an ideal solution. Enterprise content management at times it allows you to be able to not only handle documents and content from A to B to be able to allow people to retrieve and access that information, but be able to run through processes and run through business processes and automate this to allow organizations, people throughout your entire organization to interact. The reason why I say it's ideal is because sometimes a good amount of the time it's not very well executed or very well accomplished. I can give you countless examples of this. An extreme example of this would be the National Program for IT that the NHS tried to conduct over the past 8 years. I would believe it's about it's this idea of, they basically put in £9 billion to achieve nothing. And it was this idea of being able to handle and understand this, to handle the big problem of paper medical records. I was standing in a warehouse a couple of years back. It was a massive warehouse. They were one of the NHS trusts where they stored all their patient records. They were spending about £120,000 a year just to have this warehouse there. 48 million bits of paper. And if you've never seen 48 million pieces of paper, it's exactly what you think it looks like. It is absolutely massive. And you have records, medical records, and these are people's lives. If the information is not secure or accessible, it could mean people's lives effectively. But you have records, bound all over the ground in massive folders, and you can imagine finding one piece of paper in that kind of a haystack. If you lose it, that's it. If it's not in that green folder that it was supposed to be in, it's almost impossible for them to find it. The problem is that they don't know how to approach it, but at the same time, it's not sustainable. I mean, not only does it cost them a ton of money to be able to handle that, but also it's not sustainable in the sense that, with the speed that they need to move at, it'll take them maybe days to find a record. I mean, it's as simple as that, and that's the risk behind something like this. And so, but the problem is that they just threw a lot of money at it, try to give this very, very nice, beautiful picture, but over the span of 8 years, they realized no return on investment, no value. And it's because of this fact that the fact of the matter is that they try to go at it too big. If you try to change the culture of your organization by throwing a big walloping piece of enterprise content management technology on top of it, really the biggest part of this, and as Fergal did mention, is this idea of investment. You're not going to get the investment or the buy-in from the right people in your organization. So really what we've come down to is this idea of agile, this agile approach. So as a company, we've been in business for 25 years. We've come from this idea of document management. We understand how the proven approach works. We understand how the ideal solution works. But really what we're saying is that we're able to go in, identify a very high value, high impact part of your business and prove ourselves. And then once we prove ourselves, we're able to scale effectively throughout your organization. Implement it, department by department, if you will. But basically through this idea is the fact that you're not sacrificing your tool set. You're getting the entire tool set at the beginning. But what you're doing is you're basically are able to go about this in an approach that will allow you to be very flexible, to not risk too much from a deployment standpoint, and also prove the value as you move forward. And this is the idea of Agile ECM. And so from our company's perspective, this is the way that we go about it, because the proof is in the pudding. If it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, then effectively the level of investment, you're not putting in £1 billion for it, right? And that's really what it's about. And To be fair, we've done this in a number of different organizations, and we can prove in terms of the figures that we've come up with. For example, one of our large financial services company in the UK are utilizing our software for loan processing. They've had a very outdated way of going about it. They basically took basically the pieces of paper, the loan applications, and they looked at a screen with their account system, and they compared the two. And they were able to process maybe about 50 applications an hour for one person. We basically took the paper out of their hands, implemented a system that will allow them to do the checks automatically so that when they look at the screen, they're basically just flying through these things. And we were able to increase their productivity by 40%. It's these kinds of stories that will drive organizations, obviously, to look at this technology. But what I'm saying, and if there's anything to take away from this, is that you are able to realize gains in terms of cutting costs and increasing efficiency, but also laying down a foundation for governance, risk, and compliance. And this idea that we have the ability to help you manage your content, to be able to standardize it and adhere to a particular policy around it, is really what we're trying to promote here. Along with that is this idea of a proven and an immediate ROI through this idea of Agile ECM. And I'll give you a very clear example of this. We just recently got the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency on board as a customer of ours. They went out to tender at the end of July, early August, and they're already go live at the beginning of October. So you're looking at a turnaround of a little over 2 months. Interestingly enough, the project manager who's really, really had a pleasant experience with us, he was on another project with another ECM application that he had left from a year ago. And they were just about to go live when he left the company. He saw a colleague on the road. They stopped by and had a chat. He said, how's that project going? A year after the time of the fact that they made the investment in the purchase, they still haven't gone live yet. But we were able to do it in 2 months. I mean, it's this idea of being able to realize the return on investment and the value that you're getting from a solution like this is a very, very, important approach in the sense of being able to be very agile in the way that you work. And then finally, choosing the right solutions partner will lead to greater sustainability within your organization. So that as technology moves forward, you know that your solutions partner is always going to be looking to push those boundaries as well, so that in 5 years' time, you know, or you have at least confidence in the fact that you're going to be able to keep up with the trends in terms of the way that people work.